Chapter 1. Runestone, in the private quarters of Lady Rhea Royce. While the first snow of winter gathers upon the Vale's high peaks, Rhea sat on her bed of oak and bronze, where her newborn son rests beside her. And to disturb that peace, Lord Yorbert Royce of Runestone enters, grim-faced and weary. You should have sent for me sooner, Rhea. Word of your labor reached me only later from the whispers echoing through the halls of Runestone, and from a raven that arrived belatedly at the eyrie. He said, I could have been here, to support you in such times. But you know now, do you not? That I am delivered of a son. Looking at her little boy as she said and questioned. And what of the matter of his heritage? It is what I truly need your support for. Yorbert sighed and let out the grim news. It is a bastard born out of your betrayal, he says. That Prince Daemon denied his own child. Rhea hated bitterly. Denied by a man who swore before gods and witnesses to be my husband. Daemon Targaryen is as mad and cruel as expected, to not even own the life he set quick within me. With what excuse? What lies did he say to make mine son a bastard and disgrace mine honor? As you know, he claims he has not left King's Landing these 11 moons. Yorbert reminded. With his loyal men and the people of the capital as his witnesses. So, he claims that loudly. Rhea muttered in exhaustion. I would not have any of his beguiled men say I speak false, yet I have none that can prove he was here. But he did come to me, one night, cloaked and unannounced, when the moon was thin, clouds heavy. Perhaps to hide his use of a dragon and plan this whole twisted deception. The Lord of Runestone knew that story and believed her, he does. Alas, the king and mayhaps the queen lend some ear to his tongue even if he is akin to a black sheep to their dragon family. What a conciliator, what a good queen. Rhea said with scornful mockery. To wrong us like so. To wed me to a monster and fault their great Granon as this. Yorbert should have chastised her for maligning the realm's rulers, instead he appeased. Time will tell your truth, Rhea. But I'm also afraid time may not have been kind to King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne. Their old age is clouding their judgment and recent tragedies have worsened it. Gravely, he added. So, at present, the boy cannot bear the name Targaryen, if the prince disowns him and the royal family does not accept him. Then and there, Rhea decided. So let him bear mine. He is of my blood, Royce born, and no less for Daemon's shame. If it were so simple. Yorbert said grimly. The laws of men and the tongues of fools will not grant him our bronze. If the prince's seed he is not, the people of the Vale and the rest of Westeros will call him Stone, as they name all sons with such marital complications. Stone. Rhea shouted with rising anger. Shall my son, born in lawful wedlock, suckle that name? Shall Runestone's heir apparent be cast among the bastards of shepherds and camp followers? Even if the other houses say otherwise, why not legitimize him? You are the lord of the Royces, are you not? Be at ease, Rhea. Rage will not mend this. The Runestone lord said. The favor is against us. If the Targaryens are in the understanding that he is a bastard, then he must be a bastard for others. That is the weight of their decisions, backed by dragons. Calling your son a Royce, as right as it should be, will be seen as an affront and act of mutiny given that you are still the prince's wife. Let the dragons choke upon their pride. Rhea raged on. I will not see my boy scorned while I draw breath. It would be to challenge the judgment of the realm's rulers. Yorbert Royce reminded. Think of the consequences and trouble that it will bring to our house. Rhea defended that. I would only speak the truth before the gods and all the realm. Let them hear that Daemon Targaryen bedded me, and from that night came this child. Let them see the boy when he grows. If his hair turns silver as moonlight, what then shall they say? Time will tell your truth, as I said. Yorbert reasoned. They will say the gods mock us. Yet I would counsel care, Rhea. The Targaryens guard their honor as they guard their dragons. To cross them is peril. The new mother remained adamant. Then let peril come. I am a Royce of Runestone. Our bronze does not bend, even when dragons burn. Yorbert sighed once again. Bronze bends Rhea, for dragonfire it will. So, we can only begrudgingly accept that the realm will call him Stone. But mind you that here, in these halls, he shall be yours and mine to shield, and he can be called whatever your name for him is. It is all that I, in mine weakness, can do for the both of you. He wearily added. Ashamed, as a descendant of the Bronze Kings of old, to have fallen this way. To such a plight, Rhea could only understand, even if it pained her so. And after a while of rumination and gazing at her newborn son, she said. Then let him be Ronan Stone of Runestone until his truth burns bright enough to melt the bronze and shame the dragons. By then, he will become Ronan Royce while the Targaryens could only hope to claim him for their mistake. Lord Royce breathed relief. Placing a hand on her shoulder, he said to her that, "The gods bless you, Rhea. The fight you choose is not a small one. Nor is the love I bear my son." Rhea affirmed. "But I must say that for this grudge, I will remember." "We remember, Rhea." Lord Royce echoed, in the motto of their house. "We remember." Chapter 2. Oh geez, this was awkward, but he also remembered. Awkward because this was a thought that was actually coming from a baby. The baby, caught in between the very medievalesque talks of the older Royces. One should be his new mother, while the other is his relative of unclear relations. And apparently, he was now Ronan. Granted, he had other names to go for from the top of his head, like Rolls maybe, to become Rolls Royce, but what can he do? He's just a baby at the moment and it is what it is. Either way, this should technically be the day he is named, even when it is already 5 days past his traumatic exit from the womb. Because his surname is pretty disputed, apparently. Because of the mess that Daemon Targaryen was stirring. And yeah, because of that connection between Daemon Targaryen and Rhea Royce, it is clear that he was in the House of the Dragon. As a deviation from what was supposed to be a barren marriage. Thankfully, he watched that show. And as mentioned, he remembered that his mother looks suspiciously similar to that woman that got enhorsed and got her head bashed. So, House of the Dragon, the TV show it is. He remembered watching it and remembered everything else from his life before this. When he was a normal man from a normal world, with his most notable feat being a writer of fanfiction, with some originals in his belt as well. But fanfiction took the cake. 'Cause he wrote lots of it. Mostly self-indulgent garbage about Hollywood, pop culture staples, and anime-based stories. And they were all trash, as he notes to his readers time and time again. He also wrote some Game of Thrones self-inserts, but look at where he was now, actually having his own self-inserted, albeit in a sister title to the franchise of A Song of Ice and Fire. What are the odds that he was another Daemon and Rhea child, like many other fanfics like it? Still, he wasn't really sure why or how he was here, or what kind of cosmic joke this was, but he was kind of looking forward to it. Sorry to his old life and all that, but this is actually very cool. Especially when he introspected even deeper into his mind. Further into his consciousness, subconscious, or whatever. Where he saw a faint light. From a page, unfolding like paper in his dark thoughts. Words appeared there, glowing faintly, written in perfect neat script. Like a centered title, it wrote, "Heaven rewards diligence." He didn't know what that meant, yet. Though he had ideas, cause it was quite familiar. Maybe it was advice. Maybe it was a warning. Or maybe it was so much more. Either way, the message and the page stayed, and no doubt that it will most likely help a lot. For he was Ronan now. Ronan Stone. Ronan Royce. Ronan Targaryen, or whatever the hell this life will lead him to be called. And perhaps with this Goldfinger of a page, he'll write his own epic story, with him actually living it and not just writing it. Chapter 3. With all that out of the way, in the first year of his life, the child born of Lady Rhea Royce and her estranged husband, Prince Daemon Targaryen, grew beneath the shadow of runestones, runes and shields of bronze. He was called Ronan. And through the mouths of courtiers and small folk alike, a designated last name clung to him far more readily, which is none other than Stone. Instead of Royce or Targaryen. For all Lady Rhea's insistence that her son was born of lawful wedlock, the realm had turned its ear to the prince's denial. And so the boy, who had entered the world amid cold winds and cruel whispers, was made to wear the mark of being a bastard as other babes wear swaddling cloth. Yet within the Royce seat, there were those who treated him not as a stain but as kin. Though rarely present due to his duties at the Eyrie, Lord Yorbert Royce himself saw proper to the child's welfare and treatment, granting nurse and maids, and allowing Lady Rhea her peace within the bronze-walled keep. Ever since the discrediting of her claims, the helpers of Runestone said she seldom smiled, save when the boy reached for her hair or clutched her finger with his tiny hands. By the moon of his 6th month, baby Ronan's sparse hair began to grow, black as jet, with not a single thread of Targaryen silver. To some who paid attention to the drama, this was proof enough of Daemon's claim. The gods mark true blood and the dragon's blood is marked by silver, which is what some say. But others, more kind or cautious, murmured that the color of a babe's hair was a poor measure of his parentage. Supposing that the babe's gray eyes which has hints of purple is support. Be that as it may, the gossip reached even to King's Landing, where courtiers jested of the bronze bitch's black-haired whelp. Principal of which is the Prince Daemon himself, who was said to have laughed, saying only that, the seed of the dragon does not root in disloyal bronze. Still, Runestone endured. Lady Rhea raised her son among her people, singing him the songs of the Vale and reciting the names of the runes carved in her hall's pillars, as if the babe would even care. Though she could not change his name in the eyes of the realm, she gave him all else that might belong to a trueborn son: love, learning, and lineage. But outside of Runestone, the realm continued to be unkind. At some point, missives bore tidings of a great tourney, proclaimed to celebrate the 50th year of King Jaehaerys' reign. Knights from across the Seven Kingdoms descended upon the capital, bearing banners bright as flame, and the streets swelled with revelry. The tourney was said to be the grandest since the conquest itself, with an established Prince of Roganus favored to win the lists, and the royal dragons wheeled above the city in slow, burning majesty. To the common folk, it was a testament to the unbroken strength of House Targaryen. However, the spectacle did baby Ronan no favors. The more the singers praised the silver-haired princes and the splendor of the dragons, the more the gossip of the dark-haired bastard of Runestone curdled into scorn. By the year's end, one can only hope that the realm forgot him, save for those within his home. There, under the watchful eyes of runes and the echo of strong winds through the vale, Ronan Stone passed his first name day, a child denied by dragons but cradled by the mountains that meet the sea. Growing in a castle of runes and stones. Chapter 4. In the second year of Ronan's life, the snows came early to the vale. The winds that swept from the mountains sang mournful songs through the halls of Runestone, and Lady Rhea's hearth burned longer than ever before. Yet even as the flames danced upon her family's walls, no warmth could drive out the chill that had settled upon the realm. Word came from King's Landing that the youngest child of King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne, sweet Princess Gale, had cast herself into the sea. She had been called the Winter Child, gentle of heart and fair of face, and her death struck even the hardiest knights dumb with pity. Some say it was summer fever, or just winter fever. But the tale spread quickly, of how a wandering singer had won her love, how she had borne his bastard stillborn, and how grief had driven her to her end. When Lady Rhea heard it, she went silent for a long while. She knew too well the whispers that followed a woman shamed by love, and scorned by those who do not know the truth of it all. Though Gale's sorrow had drowned her, Rhea lived still, bound to the same dishonor by a husband's denial and a realm's indifference. A child born in wedlock and yet named a bastard. She murmured once, holding her son close. As if the weight of that word might snuff out his life as surely as the sea had claimed the princess. Though she wondered, if Princess Gale's babe lived, how would the Targaryens treat said child of the Winter Child? Would it be the same as Ronan's fate? Or something different? Accordingly, in the wake of Gale's death came another loss. Septon Barth, the hand of the king, passed peacefully in his sleep. To many, it was a mercy. To those who knew the old man's worth, it was a doom. The wise Septon had ever been the voice of reason beside the Iron Throne, tempering dragons with faith and fire with sense. With his death, the realm lost not only its hand but its conscience. The old king, stricken by grief from Gale's death and that following loss of the Septon, named Esser Ryam Redwyn to take Barth's place. A Kingsguard and knight of great honor and renown, yet no man known for books or policy. To those in Runestone, the choice was of little concern, but in the great tapestry of the realm, it marked an array of frayings that happened during Jaehaerys' later reign. Which was a worrisome development. But still, the realm went on. Within Runestone's bronze walls, young Ronan began to take his first steps. His babble echoed through the halls that had so long known only silence, and for a time, Lady Rhea smiled again. He had his mother's strength of gaze, and though his hair stayed black as jet, his eyes gleamed with a strange gray, flecked faintly with violet when caught by torchlight. The maester took note of it more than once, but dared not speak the thought aloud. To the small folk, the boy was known simply as Ronan Stone. The name clung to him as the winter winds clung to the cliffs. To Lady Rhea, he was Ronan Royce, son of her body and heir to her blood, though only a few would say it so. Even if said babe should still not be cognizant, she taught him words of the Vale, the runes of her house, and the old songs that told of bronze knights who cowered to no dragon, even if the latter was but a wish. Beyond the mountains, the realm wept for a dead princess and a fallen Septon. In their mourning, no one cared to hear of a boy in the Vale, half-dragon, half-warrior of bronze, and wholly unwanted by the royal line that had sired him. Yet the mountains remembered, and the runes endured. Thus passed the second year of Ronan's life, in a world where his truth found no ear, and his blood no honor, all the while that the king's peace began to wane and sorrow swept through the Targaryen line. Chapter 5. The third year of Ronan's life dawned with a thin spring sun over the Vale, cold and shy, as though the heavens themselves feared to look too long upon the world below. The snows withdrew only half-heartedly that year, leaving Runestone draped in mist and lingering frost. Yet within its walls, life persisted, stubborn as the runes that were inscribed in many of its corners and olden tools. Ronan had long begun to speak in halting words, the sort that tumble from a child's mouth like uncut stones, rough, imperfect, but precious all the same. Mama, he would say, tugging at Lady Rhea's sleeve. Or, bird, when the falcons or ravens cried beyond the window. In a rare instance, they heard him curse, drats, when he was seen mingling with castle rats. And oddly enough, meow meow ma meow, in a sad tone whenever he spots a sickly cat. He was quick of eye and quicker of hand, reaching for things he ought not touch, and his laughter, rare but bright, seemed to fill the old halls with echoes long thought lost. Those who watched him whispered that the boy was clever beyond his years. The Maester of Runestone recorded that he learned to walk before the turning of his first name day. And by the coming of his second, he could climb the small steps and stroll the halls of the castle without wanting aid. His curiosity spared no corner of the keep. Often he was found by the hearth, tracing the carved sigils upon the stones with tiny fingers, murmuring the shapes and arrangements of runes as Lady Rhea had taught him earlier on. And yet, beyond those proud walls, the realm bent once more beneath the weight of sorrow. At King's Landing, the appointed Esir Ryam Redwyn, once lauded as a knight of unmatched valor, had proven ill-fitted to rule the council chambers. His knowledge was lacking and his words wandered. By the time he begged release from his duties, few at court were surprised, and fewer still mourned his return to duties as a white cloak. In his stead, the old king named his son, the spring prince Balon or Balon the Brave, his living and present son, as both hand and heir. For a moment, hope flickered in the royal halls. Songs were sung in Balon's praise, and the people took heart that peace might yet endure beneath his hand. But joy, like tempered breeze in the vale, seldom lingers long. In the seventh moon, black tidings swept from Dragonstone. The good Queen Alysanne, the realm's mother, the peacemaker, the queen who had fought for women and the weak, had breathed her last. She had no tears left to shed, and so the stranger took her to the mother in peace, which was what many claimed. Still, her passing struck the realm as a storm might fell an old oak, sudden, inevitable, and grievous. The old king shut himself away, and for many days, none were permitted to enter his chambers. From Aldtown to other cities, bells tolled in mourning, from the Red Keep's high towers to the smallest sept in the fingers, candles were lit for the good queen's soul. In Runestone, the news came as a whisper borne on a chill wind. Lady Rhea sat long in silence upon hearing it. She had only met Alysanne in a few glimpses and greetings due to the unexpected betrothal, yet those scant memories of the queen lingered. Her decrees protecting women's rights, her kindness to those wronged by men of power. Had she not secluded herself? Rhea said softly. Perhaps she would have heard me and truly listened. For though 3 years had passed since Ronan's birth, Daemon Targaryen's denial still held sway, unchallenged by king or court. Rhea's pleas had grown quieter, not from surrender but from exhaustion. In the eyes of the realm, her son remained Ronan Stone. Still, within their home, life went on. The boy grew stronger, climbing walls he should not climb, laughing at the wind, chasing the falcon's shadow across the courtyard. When he smiled, Rhea's heart ached, for in him she saw not only what she had lost but what the world refused to see, that her son was no shadow of shame, but her living defiance. Thus passed a century after Aegon's conquest, the year that took the good queen from the realm, while a mother in bronze raised her child that his supposed great-grandmother had set aside. Chapter 6. When 100 years after Aegon's conquest eventually dawned, Runestone was still stuck in between slopes and waves. Beneath veils of fog and snow, far removed from the greater matters of the realm. Yet even its calmness could not keep out the tremors of change that began to shake the Seven Kingdoms. Prince Balon the Brave, the king's last surviving son in succession, had died from a sudden belly sickness, and his passing left the Iron Throne without a clear heir. Regardless, the prince's life had been full of purpose, his death full of consequence. A belly burst and matters took a turn for the worst. For without Balon, the royal bloodline stood in doubt. Even more than when they doubted the supposed grandson he never paid much attention to. The old King Jaehaerys, long revered as the conciliator, was by then aged and frail, the years and sorrows of his reign etched deep upon him. His body was almost failing, but his will endured. To preserve peace, he summoned the lords of Westeros to Harrenhal for what would be remembered as the Great Council, the first of its kind in the history of the realm. He called for this great council to prevent a war being fought over his succession. For he knew the cold truth. The only thing that could tear down the house of the dragon was itself. 14 names were said to be offered for succession, though only 2 shone bright enough to draw true support. Prince Viserys, the late Balon's eldest son, and Princess Rhaenys, the late Aemon's eldest daughter. The eldest daughter of the eldest son. It was said that the debates within those blackened halls lasted for weeks. With the spring prince dead, who will be the heir? Will it be to a woman or will it pass to the man? Banners of 100 houses fluttered beside those great and small. And though Runestone sent no delegation of its own, Lady Rhea Royce heard every word that filtered through raven and rumor. She might have wondered then, had the gods been less cruel, if her own son's name could have one day been spoken among them. For was he not of Targaryen blood through his father? Yet such thoughts were folly. Her son had long been struck from the line of dragons by the very man who now called this council into being. Even Lord Yorbert, who had attended as Lady Jane's regent, hasn't had his pleas heard. In any case, the decision came swift and sure. Prince Viserys was chosen by overwhelming acclaim, the lords of Westeros lifting him as heir for his gentle manner, and his opportune descent through the male line. Thus, Viserys became the heir to the Iron Throne, and the matter of succession, though settled, left embers that would perhaps smolder for years to come. While in Runestone, it was the same as always, but also different. For young Ronan reached his 4th name day. He grew quickly, fair of face with hints of his father's fierce features but dark of hair, with gray eyes circled with purple, as a sign of his ancestries. He was as lively as any child of his years, prone to laughter and mischief, though his mother swore his gaze was older than his flesh, thoughtful, too often aware. The Maester of Runestone began to tutor him in simple letters and tales. To the learned man's surprise, the boy took to learning as a hawk to flight. He memorized words after hearing them only a few times, traced letters in both ink and snow, and would spend hours poring over the same book until he could recite whole passages, and form it into better knowledge. It was no simple feat. And a trait that would prove to be a boon for many in the future to come. Whilst at 5, he had begun to ask questions the Maester could scarce answer, about dragons, bloodlines, prophecies, runes, the first men, children of the forest, giants, magic. Then it was about taming, breeding, calculations, forging, shipbuilding and so on. The Maester could only reply with what he could, consult from the Royce stockpiles, and ask for new text from the Citadel when he could. Hungry for truth and progress, the young boy was. Then came the year 103 AC, the year that ended in age. King Jaehaerys I, the old king, passed peacefully in his sleep after 55 years upon the Iron Throne. The realm mourned as it had not mourned in living memory. Bells tolled across the 7 kingdoms. From Dragonstone to King's Landing, dragons were seen circling in the skies, as if they, too, felt the weight of his passing. Vermithor much more so. For Lady Rhea, the king's death carried a bitter taste. Jaehaerys had been the foremost decision upon her son's heritage, the one who had sealed his fate as stone. And now he was gone, beyond reach, beyond appeal, beyond mercy. But for the world, a new chapter had begun. Prince Viserys ascended the Iron Throne as King Viserys I Targaryen. His reign began in peace and splendor, and his court shone bright as any since it was not long from the Conciliator's rule. Songs were sung of his kindness and his love for celebration, his good humor and open hand. Yet far from King's Landing, in the cold high halls of Runestone, another story quietly continued. Ronan Stone, bastard of the Rhea, turned 6 in that same year. He climbed towers he should not, pestered Maester for books, and learned his letters of the runes, High Valyrian, and even the Old Tongue faster than any other. He could already name all the houses of the kingdoms, even painting their sigils and symbols, cause he took up art on the side of his studies as well. The begrudging relatives and the gossipy small folk of Royce lands call him the little bastard who reads too much, but Lady Rhea saw in him something deeper. A spark that would not dim, no matter how the realm tried to deny it. And though the dragons had forgotten him, and the late king had judged him false, she had not. In their shadow, under bronze and stone, the boy grew, as clever as he was curious, as bright as the sun yet cold as the wind that howled through the mountains. For though he bore none of the dragon's prominent silver marks, Ronan of Runestone burned with a quiet fire of his own, one that the world had yet to see. Chapter 7. What an eventful 6 or so years it was, for the kingdoms of Westeros, that is. Deaths after deaths and then new management, just like that. Ronan summarized it simply, even when his passing of the time was actually quite different from the rest of the realm. Pretending to be a baby, then a toddler, and now a little boy wasn't exactly easy. Fortunately, He had his own improvised VR game to kill time. Then again, leaving shit in the butt and drenching oneself in pee isn't anything fun. Even when you feel like some spoiled lord whenever someone else wipes and cleans it out for you. The breastfeeding was something else entirely. Sucking on his mother's was pretty awkward and very Sigmund Freud, but the substituting wet nurses were a treat. Of course, what followed was the crawling around on all fours, then the waddling, and then walking on 2 feet. Like those of his age, he also drooled, he babbled, he imitated, then talked. To reinforce his cover some more, he explored not just the corners of this castle but also the trees, the hills, and trailed behind birds. Admittedly, those latter parts were more fun to do. Exploring his inner child, in a child's body at that. It also helped that runestone and the landscapes of the Vale were very aesthetic, as long as it wasn't covered by unpredictable winters and plagued by mountain clan attacks. Fortunately, the more indoor activities are exciting to do too. Like spotting the runes of the walls and armors, and reading up on what the maester needs him to learn. And that's not because he was some bookworm nerd into esoteric calligraphy. He was far from it. It's just that the page in his head makes it so worth it. Heaven rewards diligence, which is as advertised. As long as he puts effort into something, he gets rewarded, so maybe this page was heaven itself. Take his praised and quick mastery of the Old Tongue and High Valyrian for example. Which are rewards from reading books of those languages, over and over and over, cause they sure were hard as can be. But repetition was key. And as long as he puts in some effort, he will be able to make progress. For that kind of diligence, something was due. And in the end, he's eventually able to master the contents of what he's read. Granted, that was not all there is to it. Aside from assisted mastery, the page dishes out its heavenly reward. Which is content and knowledge that is better and very much improved from what was mastered. Writing it out in its empty spaces for him to learn even further, which is logistically weird given that a single page literally fits an entire book's worth and more. Of course, given that it's a reward, it doesn't stay imprinted in the page for long as the text's dispersed out from it, and merges into its surrounding space, which is literally his mind. Meaning that he had those improved knowledge swirling about in his head, waiting for him to digest and master again. Quite complex of a cheat, isn't it? In any case, the gist is that it is an aid for diligence, and gifts out much better gains to further be diligent about. A cycle of progress and improvements is what this cheat offered to him. Just like how it was for the booklets of old tongues. Sort of an old tongue to common tongue dictionary that was a common read for Royces, who were required to remember their heritage as first men. With some samples like, Magnar, is Lord, Skagos, is Stone, Sigeric, is Deceiver, and, Wodok Nag Gran, means squirrel people. Accordingly, with that booklet, Ronan read, reread, and twisted his tongue when reciting such a coarse, harsh, and clanging dialect. However, as soon as he was finally able to speak it like his main language, it was all worth it, cause the page literally awarded him with a book's worth from a booklet. A book of old tongues, is what swirled in his brain and is what he then transcribed into form after asking the maester for paper and ink. A broken pen is better than the sharpest mind, after all. And he found that it helped quite a lot in mastering these new contents. So, as if possessed by first men who wanted to bring their culture to the modern age, he spelled out new old tongue phrases and what they meant in common tongue. Making the elderly scholar understandably suspicious of its validity, but under Lady Rhea's orders, his notes and notes of papers were compiled and bound. Making for a much heftier assignment for future Royce heirs to memorize. A headache that was birthed by Rune and Stone. His pen name that was attached in case they curse him in his grave. And yeah, he is kind of a published author in this world, which is a much better writership standing than his last. By virtue of the page's new improvement cycle, he could even go further and make a Book of Old Tongues, Volume 2. Then again, it was such a waste to use this Goldfinger to just be a glorified historical linguist. Nor did he just want to stop at side hobbies like doodling and painting. Ronan had other plans, far better plans for a more exciting future he had in mind. Chapter 8. Lady Rhea Royce had lived long enough to know that children of 6 named days old did not write books. They barely held quills properly, much less filled pages with sense. And yet, her son had done just that. A Book of Old Tongues, as he titled it. A strange little thing she had the maester bind in simple leather, written in her boy's own careful hand. The maester swore he had only guided the boy through the first pages, then watched, baffled, as Ronan took to the rest on his own. Rhea read it in full one night while her son slept in the next chamber. The words were written clean and certain, with the surety of a man twice, no, thrice his age. He not only translated the coarse old tongue phrases but expanded upon them, drawing lines between meaning and sound, between rune and speech, as if he saw the shape of the language rather than simply learned it. It made her uneasy. And proud. And frightened, all at once. The Royces were of the first men. That much was beyond question. They had kept the old ways longer than most of the Vale, had clung to the runes and the stones when the Andals came with their steel and seven. Every boy and girl of Runestone was taught the old tongue enough to trace their lineage. But none, not Rhea, not her forebears, not even the learned maesters had ever spoken it with the fluency her son now showed. It was as though the words came to him with ease. And then came High Valyrian. Rhea had not wanted him to learn it at first. That was Daemon's tongue, not hers. But the maester insisted it would serve the boy to be versed in both tongues of his supposed blood, and Rhea relented, partly from duty, partly from that quiet, dangerous hope she never quite let die. Perhaps, she thought, if the gods were kind or if those dragons finally realized, then her son might yet find one willing to bond. The Targaryens could consider him a bastard all they wished, but the fire in his blood should not lie. To her surprise, Ronan's progress in High Valyrian was much the same as before, swift, sure, near unnatural. He read aloud with perfect pitch after days, not moons. His notes grew longer, his understanding sharper. The maester said it was a gift. Rhea was not so certain. There was something in him, some hidden spark that the rest of the world had overlooked or forgotten. She saw it clearest when it came to the runes. When she could steal time from her duties, Rhea would take Ronan to the old vaults beneath Runestone, where relics of their ancestors were kept. Chipped blades, cracked shields, and the most prized of all, sets of bronze plate armor etched with runes so old their meaning had been lost to every Royce for generations. It was said that those who wore them could not be cut or pierced. The maesters called it a myth. But Rhea had her doubts. She would watch her son kneel before those relics, tracing the symbols with small fingers, eyes alight with the same curiosity that drove him to words and books. He would hum softly to himself as if the runes were speaking back, and sometimes the air around the bronze would seem different. Once, she swore she saw faint lines shimmer where the old carvings caught the light, like embers that refused to die. At first, Rhea was worried but she did not panic. Instead, she placed a hand on his shoulder and told him to keep his studies of these quiet. The world had grown wary of things it could not explain. And the Royces had no wish to draw the eye of those who feared sorcery as much as they hungered for it. Keep this between us, my son. She told him. Some knowledge must live in shadow, or it will not live at all. He nodded, solemn for one so young. Rhea did not know what manner of force had stirred in her child. First men craft, dragon's blood, or something born of both, but she knew it was real. The runes, the words, the fire in his blood. In her heart, she believed this. Whatever gods had denied him his silver hair and royal heritage, mayhaps have given him something else in turn. And beneath the cold stones of Runestone, that gift had begun to wake. Chapter 9. It began as a stick. At least, that's what the small folk thought when they first saw the young bastard of Runestone hurl one into the sea. The boy had been seen often near the cliffs, whittling away at bits of wood. The maester said he'd taken an interest in carpentry after asking for books about the craft. The servants whispered that it was another of his strange fascinations, like the old runes or the dead tongues he read aloud to himself. Lady Rhea only smiled when asked, saying her son was simply curious. But one morning, as the mists rolled in from the surroundings, the boy threw his odd and bent stick over the waters, and the stick actually came back. It wasn't just a trick of the wind, though many thought it at first. He threw again, farther this time, and once more, the wooden curve circled in the air and spun straight back into his hand. The small folk gathered along the port walls gasped, clasping themselves and muttering prayers. Witchcraft. Someone whispered. Magic. Said another. Clever hands. Said an onlooking wise man, squinting hard to make sense of it. In any case, word spread fast. The bastard boy had made a toy that defied reason. A stick that returned to its master. He called it a boomerang, a name no one had ever heard before. Before long, half the children of Runestone wanted one. Ronan Stone perhaps felt generous and showed many how to shape the wood and bend it just right. Some he carved himself for the children he knew, the sons of knights and relatives he knew of House Royce. Others he left to the wood craftsmen of Runestone lands, who began copying his multitude of designs, encouraging them to make changes to its size and color. So, the wood-chipping small folk began to trade them, paint them when they have dye, race them across the wind. Fishermen swore by them for practice throwing nets, and grown men used them for fun in their idle hours. Even the maester wrote a small scroll describing the toy's flight, calling it a study in balance and force unseen in any Westerosi design. He sent his notes to the citadel, hoping the archmaesters might take notice. They did, and the boomerang of runestone was recorded in the annals as a new curiosity of the Vale. A toy born from the hands of a boy too young, by rights, to craft anything so precise and marvelous. Of course, there were doubters. Merchants from Gulltown claimed they'd seen something similar across the narrow sea. A sellsword swore the Summer Islanders had such toys for sport. Even a maester from the Arbor argued that such a thing must have come from Essos, not the Vale. A few muttered darker things, that the toy moved by unseen power, that the bastard boy's cursed blood gave the wood its life. Lady Rhea heard those whispers and worried. For a short while, she even wondered if the toy was touched by the same force that made his runes shimmer. But after hearing her son explain the craft, the shape, the curve, the air, she was at ease. No spells. No fire. Just thought and diligence. Still, she made him promise to keep quiet about how easily it came to him. The world fears what it cannot understand. She reminded the boy. Let them think it's skill and ingenuity, and you'll be safe. However, the craze didn't stop there. Traders carried the boomerangs farther west, then south, until they reached the courts of other lords. Nobles in the Reach and the Riverlands bought them for their children. The little maiden of the Eyrie herself was said to have one, gifted from runestone as a curiosity. Even King's Landing heard of it. When the tale reached the Red Keep, King Viserys reportedly chuckled and a seed of doubt lingered in his head. All the while that his daughter, the young Princess Rhaenyra, was said to have begged for one and spent an afternoon throwing it across the gardens until her septa made her stop. As for Daemon Targaryen, when he heard it was his wife's bastard's invention, he actually smirked. None knowing what it truly meant. On the other hand, Rhea never cared for their thoughts. She just saw what they could not, that in her son's hands, even a bit of carved wood could become something wondrous. And in the quiet evenings of runestone, she watched him throw that first boomerang again and again, catching it clean each time, smiling faintly as it spun back through the salt air. Mastering it quick into something that was more than his toy. Maybe even a weapon. For most, it really might just be his toy. But for her, it was proof that her son could make things return. Chapter 10. Oh geez, is how Ronan reacted to the people's reaction. 'Cause he thought that it was a bit much. It was just a boomerang, after all. Then again, he kind of expected this to happen. For whenever he plans of dropping his fanfic characters in any backwards medieval settings, something like the boomerang is what he drafts up. It kind of helped him that this thing is not at all actually prevalent in Westeros, and he took an unexpected advantage. For even he thought that the words of his unknown detractors had some weight to them, that the boomerangs could very well be already existent in Essos and beyond. In any case, he sought to maximize the first introducer benefits, drawing up and designing and building boomerangs that he gave away. But in secret, he was optimizing diligence, so that heaven rewards him with better designs and great boomerang crafting capabilities. A gift of both knowledge and skill, which he then shared with whoever is skilled with the wood in the territory, pushing it onto them like the empty sponge of ideas that they are, to create an industry and earn all the monies. However pitiful it was, it is still money. From one-wing boomerangs to six-wing boomerangs and onwards. Even the weird and inexplicably shaped ones are part of what is to be traded. To establish runestone is the place of the foremost boomerang makers of the realm against eventual copycats. With more designs to come as long as Ronan does his diligence. Maybe even weapon-worthy boomerangs, like shuriken-shaped ones, weirdly curved axes, or even an ultraflattened Mjolnir. Which is why he allocated some time to also master the fun toy, to be like Sokka or even Captain Boomerang himself. But that is just a distracting idea in of itself, for his real intention was truly to learn the craft of woodwork and carving. So, the smart thing to do was also move on to other woody creations. To wow Westeros and earn some fame and influence on the side, through the introduction of unique stuff he knew from his previous world. Before long, when Runestone's woodcarvers thought they had seen the peak of the bastard boy's odd inventions, another strange toy took to the air. This one did not return. It flew true, smooth and swift, then simply fell, meant to be caught by another's hand. The small folk called it the flat wheel at first, a round wooden plate no larger than a man's helm, light and thin with its edges curved just so. But the boy, Ronan Stone, called it a frisbee. He showed the children how it was meant to be played, not alone this time, but together. One throws, the other catches. A toy of shared laughter, not skill or sorcery. And just like that, another wave swept through Runestone, and beyond. The older men marveled at how steady it flew, the maester once again scrawled his notes about air and balance, and the women of the household smiled to see their children play without fear of splinters or bruises. A non-returning boomerang, they called it. Safer, simpler, yet somehow more delightful. Before long, the flying disc of the Vale was being carved up in Gulltown and other woodworking lands alike. The expected imitators who wanted a piece of the boomerang and now this new one. But Runestone's innovation still got a leg up with colored designs, albeit in vain. It didn't take long for fainted discs of all colors were traded at where they should be traded, sometimes engraved with the sigils of houses, making even some knights be seen trying their hand at the odd toy and its accompanying sport. But with this second creation came greater whispers. Of what wood lies inside the bastard of Runestone's mind? Does he dream in strange shapes? Is this child touched by some craft beyond reason, or is he simply mad? Some unburdened maesters debated in their letters, some insisting the boy was merely gifted, others wondering if lost knowledge of the first men or even Valyrian art ran in his veins. But those were worries from the speculative and crazy. Nevertheless, the reach of the bastard boy's toy stretched farther still. Even in King's Landing, where the boomerang craze had yet to die down, the tale of the new toy reached the Red Keep. Where the Princess Rhaenyra, curious as ever, is said to have acquired a frisbee for herself. When it arrived, under royal changes, it became a polished ashwood disc with the sigil of House Targaryen etched upon its face. She was said to have spent an entire afternoon tossing it across the gardens. The young Alicent Hightower, ever her companion, joined in the play. Even Queen Emma herself is reported to have laughed from her seat as the two girls chased after the spinning disc, their laughter echoing off the Red Keep stones. And so, with royalty admiring it, others soon followed with scrutiny and curiosity. And so, while the maesters wrote of mechanics and the small folk talked of miracles, the realm once more turned their attention to Bastard of Runestone, a child with a mind of wood, winds, and whimsy. Chapter 11. By the time the flying discs of the Vale had reached even the cobbled courts of King's Landing, Ronan Stone was already knee-deep in his next creations. Runestone's workshops had grown noisy, saws, lathes, and laughter mingled freely. The boomerangs still flew. The frisbees still spun. Yet the bastard's mind, restless as ever, turned toward circles once more. Only this time, the circle would not fly. The next of them was nothing but a ring, smooth, round, and large enough to fit around a grown woman's waist, thrice over. What, exactly does it do? Other than being a waste of what should be a flimsy wheel for a carriage. Apparently, like the wheel, it circles, endlessly, if one is good enough to do so. A claim that earned chuckles and raised brows alike. The hula hoop, as the bastard boy called it, was deemed strange and frivolous by others, neither toy nor sport nor art. Most of Runestone's folk and curious people beyond thought the boy had finally made something useless. Children preferred the flying toys. Men preferred tools and weapons. And women, though amused, had better things to do than sway and twirl a ring of wood about their hips. The hula hoop should have gathered dust for a time, turning into a forgotten oddity stacked behind shelves of unsold curiosities. But fashions in Westeros were as fickle as the sea winds that brushed the Vale. It began with one lass, who, out of boredom or curiosity, tried the strange ring again and found herself laughing when it actually stayed up and spun. Then another joined in. Then another. Before long, word spread among the land's young ladies that the toy trimmed the waist and kept the hips light. That, of course, was never proven, yet gossip needs no proof. By the next moon, merchants in Gulltown were selling runestone slimming rings, at a tidy markup. Wooden circles painted gold or wrapped in ribbons became the newest fascination of noble girls who wanted to be a bit more dynamic. Some even claimed it helps improve dance and motion, with finding the rhythm and all that. The bastard boy did not argue with the false rumor. If it sold, and he may even be the one who started all these untruthful claims. But while the little ladies and girls spun their circles, the boys weren't too keen on it. Fortunately, it would seem that the stone bastard had another wooden craft up his sleeve. And so came the takra. It began with a few scraps of unique rattan wood and cane, woven together into a small, hollow sphere. A ball light enough to carry and firm enough to kick. Apparently used to practice juggling with one's feet, and then to volley it against walls. Afterwards, it could be kicked and passed around to other like-minded kickers. And a game could then be played. With rules set by the ingenious bastard who introduced it. Which is the kickvolley that it came to be. Or just takraw, like how the used ball is called. A game of feet, reflexes, and acrobatic grace. Children in the villages began playing it between fences and farm walls. And before long, Runestone's youths were holding proper matches, 2 teams, 1 ball, no hands. Only skill. It became a sport of camaraderie, where bruises were earned with laughter and victory shared in sweat and smiles. Soon, some young lords of the Vale and beyond could be seen partaking, jesting that it trained them for battle and balance alike. It's hard not to partake when the takraw are disseminated their way, and when there's not much else to do. Thus, in another 2 rounds of creations, the bastard of Runestone had once again reshaped the amusements of the realm. A hoop that rolled around the hips. A sphere that danced between feet. And from the mind of a boy not yet grown came diversions that spread faster than songs. The maesters and masters at arms wondered what would come next, what other oddities the boy might pull from his head. How he'll distract the young ones that they're supposed to be teaching and training, with all these whimsical nonsense. Though it was now clear that the bastard was something else. Where others saw wood and air, he saw movement. Where others played with toys, he made the toys and shaped their joys himself. Chapter 12. Before the wooden rings had finished circling the hips of half the noble girls in the Vale, and the takraw balls were being volleyed across courtyards from Goldtown and beyond, the bastard of Runestone had moved on again. His mind was never still. If there was wood to shape, string to pull, or air to test, he was there, carving, tying, whittling. And soon enough, the workshops of Runestone began to echo with a new sound. A sharp whir, a sudden clack, followed by laughter, cheers, and sometimes a pained, ow. For Ronan Stone had introduced the trompo, or wooden spinning tops. A toy of battles and whimsy both, nothing more than a lump of carved wood with a nail at its point and a string wound around its body from the middle. But in the hands of one who knew how to flick and pull, the trompo would leap, spin, and dance across the ground like a living thing. It was the children who were fascinated first, of course. Passionately learning how to wind the string, how to release it with a snap of the wrist, and mayhaps how to catch it again in the palm before it fell still. Simple fun, or so it seemed. Until the clever bastard introduced how to make it a challenge. How one spin master can take on others in a battle. 2 or more trompos spun, collided, and chipped where the iron points met. The winner was the last one standing, the one who bested the others, damaging them to varying degrees. These losers, well, they could always carve another or buy new ones. Soon enough, spinning top fights became an interesting way to pass the time across the kingdoms. Courtyards rang with the hum of spinning wood and clattering points, and wagers were even made by grown men over whose top would outlast the rest. Ronan himself could only sigh when the maester scolded him about the hazardous entertainments he'd unleashed upon the realm. To ease their worries, the boy apparently made a smaller, gentler version, blunt-tipped, light, meant for babes and toddlers. He called them dreidels. These ones bore letters on each side, symbols that the child might spin to learn words, numbers, and fortune. Not half as thrilling as the trompos, but enough to make nursemaids smile and mothers sigh in relief. But the true wonder came next. Not a toy that spun danced upon the earth, but one that soared. It began with a frame of wood, light and sturdy, covered with thin hide stretched tight. Sometimes made of cloth that is thin and sturdy. Tied a long string, and only need to wait for the winds of the Vale to stir, and let go. And the kite took flight. Like the kite bird that is known in the realm. At first, the onlookers gasped. Then they cheered, for the small, trembling thing rose higher and higher, its tail fluttering like a banner. The bastard boy guided it from below, tugging the string so that it dipped, turned, and soared again. A bird made by man's hand. The maester nearly dropped his quill watching it. The assigned knights almost left their posts to gape. Even Lady Rhea smiled as the shape cut against the pale blue sky. Word spread like wildfire across the realm. Soon, there were kites of every kind, square, diamond, round, and strange. Some painted with house sigils, others with beasts, dragons, or moons. The winds of Runestone's hills became a playground for colors and dreams. And then, inevitably, came kite duels. 2 flyers would cross strings in the sky, each trying to cut the other's line. When one kite fell, the crowd would roar in triumph. When both tangled and crashed, laughter echoed for leagues. In a realm where only Targaryens could fly dragons, the kite became quite the interest. A symbol that even common hands could command the winds, if only for a moment. Even if it is still from the ground. Making the small folk say the bastard of Runestone had stolen a secret from the skies. The maesters wrote of him as, the bastard boy who made the air his canvas. And a few lords, half in jest and half in awe, began to call him the boy who taught men to fly. His name spread farther than the king's own in whispers. For while the new king Viserys ruled the Iron Throne, Ronan Stone ruled something stranger, the hearts and imaginations of the realm itself. Almost even overshadowing the 7-year-old princess who rode her dragon so young. But beneath the cold stones of Runestone, the boy only smiled, carving yet another shape the world had not seen before. Perhaps for him, innovations and progress like these were still far from enough. Especially when there are so many more to come. Chapter 13. It was the duty of the maester to record the deeds of Runestone, and in his long years of service, he had written of many things, births, deaths, harvests, treaties, and even battles. Yet none puzzled him more than the growing curiosity that was the young Ronan Stone, as known by others. Even when privately, he is treated as a Royce while the maester himself considers the boy Targaryen. In any case, the boy's mind, he thought, moved faster than any other, and yet the boy's hands somehow also managed to keep pace. When the child had come to him first, asking for books on carpentry and woodcraft, the maester had thought it a passing whim. Many children took up interests on the side, only to drop them when they found the work harder than it seemed. But the child Ronan was different. He did not read for the sake of reading. He absorbed. Within days, he spoke of tools with the confidence of a grown craftsman: chisel, awl, plane, rasp, and lathe, his questions sharp and well placed, his memory frighteningly clear. And soon, theory turned to practice. The maester would watch from the corner of the courtyard, quill in hand, as the boy took up scraps of wood and shaped them, shaving off slivers and chips until his vision came alive in his palm. The first triumph had been that curious stick that returned to its thrower, the boomerang, as it was named. The realm had already gone mad for that one. But for Ronan, it was only the beginning. Before long, another toy took shape. A small halfdom of wood, curved and polished, that spun in one direction and stubbornly refused to turn in the other. The maester had seen it with his own eyes. How, no matter how hard one tried, the little piece would right itself and spin the way it wished. Ronan called it the rattleback. The maester had studied its motion for hours, muttering to himself about balance, shape, and the strange harmony between motion and form. It defies common sense, he noted, yet the boy claims it does not defy reason. Everyone else who had gotten a glimpse of the curiosity was less patient with reason. They simply called it another of the Stone Boy's enchanted toys. Alas, it wasn't as popular as the others, only a small curiosity that didn't make much of a wave. So, then came the more dynamic and popular ones, from the frisbees, the hula hoops, the tops and dreidels, designs unseen before in the Vale. Some with pointed shafts that whirled on tables, others made to wobble and right themselves like dancers on a stage. They were not merely toys, they were tests of motion, the maester realized. Including the kickvolley ball and the kites. And once again, the child's mind continued to the next. From curved toys to blocks, rectangular, even, and smooth to the touch. Dozens of them, near identical in measure, which he stacked in columns and rows. The maester thought him building a wall or tower, but then the boy explained the game: pull the blocks out one by one without letting the stack fall. Ronan called it Jenga. Another curious word. When the maester sent word of this to the citadel, he expected polite dismissal. Instead, a reply came, a brief note of intrigue from an archmaester, who remarked it as a study of human patience and structure. Soon after, there were whispers that even the royal household in King's Landing had taken to it. The young Princess Rhaenyra and her friend Alicent were said to spend afternoons testing their nerve and steady hands with the blocks of runestone make. Which was enough to make Jenga spread as another game of fun and folly across the kingdoms. Added to the list of many before it. But Ronan was not done. He made thinner planks next. Building planks. Which the maester heard the boy muttered them to be. Kiva and Kapla but not Legos. Truly odd words one could not place in any tongue. Granted, the boy used them not just for play, but for private creation. Bridges, towers, halls, and miniature citadels without a single nail or clay holding them together. These building planks seemed far more versatile than stone masonry, as it is said that the new king has set himself to build a model of old Valyria. Still, it is no doubt that the boy was already learning the principles of architecture through these methods. And in the far tomorrow, these little constructions might just be constructed in Royce lands. Then came the miniatures. Tiny figures, carved with such care that their faces bore expression, soldiers, knights, ladies, even jesters. Wooden likenesses of runestone's people, uncanny and artful. There are even characters that the maester could not name. Then, as if that were not enough, Ronan made the next iterations of these statuettes move. Like the nutcracker which actually crushes nuts. And through strings and hinges, his other wooden creations actually dance. Though wooden toys and puppets are not exactly original, but the boy getting to make them at this young of age is what's noteworthy. In any case, the maester thought that might have been the end of it, until one day, he was called to the port to witness the boy's latest curiosity. Little boats of wood. It wasn't clear if they had accurate interior hulls, but those curved prows and fitted sails of cloth stitched by a seamster's hands sell the illusion. Then the boy placed them into the port's waters, and to the onlooker's shock, they floated, balanced and swift. It was not long before he made more, one with twin hulls, another with weighted stones to steady the keel. With designs much more sleek and sometimes even bigger. Many fishermen and docked captains were impressed. While the maester was alarmed. A boy of almost 7 name days should not know the secrets of floating on seawater better than grown users of boats and ships. But mayhaps this will serve as the foundation, because it was no secret that the boy had ambition for the seas and to build real ships of his own. And as if the waters were not enough, the boy did not forget about the land. Where he saw to crafting small wooden carts, with the simplest being flat boards on wheels, narrow and light. After which, he would set them at the top of a hill and let them roll while the onlooking children cheering as they raced down the slope. He called them cars, and he planned to call future races a derby. Calling on the other young ones to try to make their own. Using these cars of their own to participate in the competition. A way to encourage the budding woodworkers of the Royces to hone their craft. So young yet already thinking of strategic moves like this, on a crafting industry that he himself has spurned with his genius. At first, the maester thought it was mere passing interest, or even a unique obsession, only later did it become clear that there was something greater forming in that young mind. Ronan was building his world, piece by piece, from wood. The maester, in his quiet candlelit chambers, often found himself writing more than he ought. His chronicles had grown thick with the boy's inventive progress, and he sometimes feared that he was recording the beginning of something too large for ink to hold. He wrote one final note on the last page of the account of those young years. About how the boy's mastery of wood is not unlike his grasp of letters, complete, unsettling, and wondrous. If this is what he makes with timber, then the realm should tremble when he turns to stone and steel, or the more familiar bronze of his house. For the supposed bastard of runestone carved more than toys. Ronan Stone carved a legend in the making. Chapter 14. The boy had changed. Or temporarily changed his focus at the very least. Ronan, Rhea's son of 7 name days, no longer filled the halls with the sound of hammer or chisel, nor the smell of freshly carved wood. The moons before, it seemed that every corner of runestone and beyond echoed his name, the maester talking of his craft, children laughing at his toys, and even nobles from the Vale sending word to see the boy who made the stick that returns, up until the tower of tumbling blocks. But after his 7th name day, he grew quiet. Perhaps he has had his fill of being marveled at, or perhaps fame had become a burden to him. For now. Whatever the cause, Ronan's works seemed to no longer seek the attention of others. His hands were still busy, always busy, but his manner was different. The boy who once shared his creations so freely now kept his labors close, speaking less and thinking more. Rhea did not press him. Children grow in strange ways, and a mother learns when to let the tide take its course. Of course, before that quiet turn, he startled the household and the locals again, this time not with flying wood, but with his own body riding the waves. He called it surfing, using a long, smooth board of his own make. Rhea remembered the gasps of the fisherfolk who watched him glide over the sea's edge like a seabird too bold for its wings. They spoke of sorcery, of sea sprites carrying him, but she knew better. It was another craft, balance, and that same stubborn curiosity that had always lived in him. And yet, after the murmurs rose, he left the board and the sea behind. Apparently, a nasty wipeout happened to him and he felt it was better to visit that when he's much older. Or more skilled. Which were both a matter of time. Still, a title as the first wave rider became spoken around, as many other wave riders followed in the path he paused at. Trying and eventually achieving something that they could. Mostly locals of Royce lands, as surfing the surfboard never got too much exposure elsewhere, surfing was that much harder to learn than tying the top and kicking the takra. In any case, that was when clay took the place of timber for Ronan's developments. He began with mud, common, unremarkable mud, and shaped it with his hands as if it were something precious. The maester told her that the boy had requested books on pottery and kilnwork, and that he spent his mornings in the courtyard, molding and turning the soft clay while the maester watched with a mix of curiosity and bewilderment. It was curious, truly. To think he had mastered the ways of carving hard wood long before touching something so pliant. It was as if he had walked backward into simplicity, unmaking his own difficulty. Still, the pots he made were beautiful. The first ones were unspeakable, but after only a number of tries, he was shaping beauty. Some tall and narrow, others wide and patterned. He painted them, etched designs upon them, and then filled them with soil. For gardening, it seemed a humble pursuit, too plain for a boy of his mind, but her boy made it into something else entirely. The pots were not only vessels for plants, they were hosts for symbols. It was the runes of the house. Since the time of the Bronze Kings and First Men. He carved them on the inner sides before laying the soil over them, as though the dirt might hide their meaning. Trying to appease herself, who always said he must keep that part of him hidden. But a mother sees what she must, but she said nothing. If he wished to play at magic, then let him. Every Royce child should at least toy with the thought of the old ways. He treated the act as his first true experiment. Whether the runes had any direct power, she could not tell, yet. The plants did grow, though no faster or brighter than before. Still, he watched them like a maester with his glass, writing notes and scratching drawings. Before long, he had written an entire book, or several small ones, about the plant variety itself and his miniature gardens. He wrote under the name Rune and Stone again. Why that name, Rhea cannot say. Perhaps it was his way of tying himself to two worlds, the mystic and the mundane, his Royce part and his attached bastardy. When she asked him once why he bothered with such small plants, he said it was for the cold days, and that runes were fickle. They needed weirwood and other magical materials to make anything happen, and that maybe his time as this, Ronan Potter, was a lost cause. Yet not entirely. The boy was young, but not without foresight. He spoke of vegetables that could grow in winter, of herbs that could thrive indoors. He spoke of keeping the green alive even when the frost comes. Rhea cannot say that she understood all of it, but she saw something that was always in his eyes, a quiet planning, a sense of purpose beyond play. In the moons before his 8th nameday, he became both potter and plotter. It was not any toy to amuse the realm but hid a craft that was something subtler, something living, partly mystical. Whether it was childish futility or the first spark of something greater, Rhea thought it might be both or nothing at all. But she learned this much: when Ronan turns his mind to something, the realm should have done well to take notice. For where others see mere dirt and clay, her son sees the shape of what may yet come. Chapter 15. Sir Gerald Royce had known battle. He had ridden against the painted men of the mountains, those savage clans who came down in their hundreds to raid the Vale's villages and farms. He had fought on cold slopes and in narrow passes, with steel and shield, against foes who fought like wild wolves, quick, cruel, and without honor. And though the battles were small by the reckoning of the realm, they were enough to forge him. He was a man of runestone through and through. Bronze and oath, duty and honor, these were the words he lived by. It was not in him to question his tasks, though there were times he could not help but grumble in private. Especially now, with Lady Rhea. His cousin. His eventual liege. Headstrong, proud, unbending as the stone she ruled from. He had respect for her strength, a rare kind among women, rarer still among Royces, yet there were days he longed for the simpler order of a lord commanding and a knight obeying. But these were not simple times. In the Eyrie ruled a girl, Lady Jane Arryn, still in her youth. His uncle, Lord Yorbert Royce, served as regent, old, weary, and not long for this world. It was said he barely rose from his bed now, his body giving in, though his will had not. Soon, the weight of runestone would pass to Rhea. Gerald knew this, as did every knight and bannerman in their halls. He had his doubts, yes, but he kept them close. A Royce does not show division before others. And so when Rhea told him that her son, the boy of many names, Ronan Stone to some, Ronan Royce to her, would be his to train, Gerald simply bowed. It was his duty, and duty was reason enough. The boy's fame had reached far beyond the Vale. The maester wrote of him as a prodigy, the stone boy who carved wonders and made even lords of the realm bemused with toys of his own design. But Gerald was not a man for clever hands and pretty playthings. He believed a man's worth was measured in his stance, his strength, and his sword arm. Still, he was not blind to the strangeness of the task. A bastard, even a bright one, was not often given the honor of squiring beneath the heir's own kin. But Rhea had made it plain. He will train here, she said. Among his blood. For no one beyond Runestone will take him. Gerald had not argued. He had seen what others whispered, that the boy's name and rise had stirred unease. Especially now that Daemon Targaryen had cast Rhea aside, his marriage dissolved by the king's will. That alone was a wonder in itself. Never before had a marriage of House Royce ended so, not by widowhood or the sword, but by decree. Making Gerald wonder if that demon had schemed for it from the start, that all his cruelty and mockery of his veil wife had been to win that freedom. If so, then the boy Ronan was both curse and symbol, the unwanted link between dragon and bronze. Some called him the bastard who broke the match. Gerald had no love for Daemon, but neither did he think it wise to speak such words. Still, he wondered. Rhea swore that the boy was Daemon's. He believed her, she was too proud to lie of such a thing. And when he looked at Ronan, he could see something there that was not wholly Royce. It was not in his hair, but in his eyes, his purple-laced gray gaze. Regardless, Gerald accepted the task. From that year forth, he would teach the boy the way of the bronze. He would learn the weight of a sword, the balance of a jousting lance, the stance of a knight of the Vale. When the boy took his first lesson, Gerald saw no cringing weakness. None of that masterly aptitude dampened the boy's entrance into the way of arms. He saw control. Restraint. The kind that comes from patience rather than fear. Again and again, the boy struck with precision, not power, and when corrected, he listened. In time, he came to see that the boy's measure was study. Ronan learned every motion before he made it, as though every strike was a puzzle to solve. He was no brute, but neither was he frail. The strength came, slowly, as it should, but the focus was there from the start. After nothing less than 100 trying swings, the boy actually mastered a motion and incorporated it into his growing skill with the blade. And though Gerald did not say it aloud, he began to think that this strange boy might yet honor both sides of his blood. The dragon for half of the blood, and the bronze for the potential of the body. So began the next turning in the life of Runestone's heir that was and was not. The clever hands that once carved toys now gripped steel, and the quiet mind that once built blocks and pots began to learn the craft of battle. Gerald Royce had seen many training squires in his life. But none, he thought, would be quite like this one. He would make a bronze knight of the boy as ordered of him, but even so, he felt that this boy had his own making to be something else entirely. Either way, it would be worth the watch. Worth all the guidance. And yeah, Ronan himself was training and whatnot now. Of course, it must be noted that he wasn't really an athletic guy. Nor was he into honing his physicality. He was pretty much a couch potato at best. Either doomscrolling or watching movies in his downtime, while his most productive mode is when he's writing, lying down in his bed while doing so. So, he really should be quite far from this prodigy of a squire that Runestone knights and other squires were eyeing, murmuring about. Fortunately, he had a cheat and it was as effective to martial methods just as how it worked with knowledge. As long as he made an effort and got his reps in, he's bound to have some gains. With a corrective and improved insight rewarded after a certain threshold. The page in his head didn't discriminate. Accordingly, after changing his skins from being a linguist, an author, an artist, a rune apprentice, a wood craftsman, a captain boomeranger, a toymaker, a plank builder, a potmaker, and a gardener of a botanist. It also didn't take long for him to be a more than steady squire with unmatched woodsworthmanship. For heaven rewards diligence. Heaven rewards his diligence, indeed. Chapter 16. Of course, as someone with progressive aspirations, Ronan wasn't satisfied that it was just him alone that was getting better and better. Which is why while he's at it, he's thinking of reforms to be done alongside his fellow knights in training. Even as a young lord with very Seuss claims, these knights represent his power, and they need to be more than just fighters wearing very noticeable bronze. A transformation and reform was in order, using ideas he could remember from his old life and maybe pestering the maester some more for books on raising armies. Then books on leadership, command, fostering loyalty and all that. Of course, he also had to multitask, given that he planned to not stop his learning of other disciplines. All in all, Ronan was going to be very busy, but with the page, it should be acceptable. More than rewarding even. It began with him, that one boy. That one boy who just refused to be ordinary. Willem Royce had grown up among the clangor of steel and the scent of sweat and dust. Training yards were as common to him as prayer halls. But what had always been routine, ritual even, began to shift when the bastard of Runestone, Ronan Stone, took to the grounds in earnest. The change was quiet at first. Subtle. A few longer hours here, a few new drills there. But before long, the whole yard began to move differently. He was just a boy like many his age, yet he trained like a man possessed. There was rhythm in his motions, a strange patience that none of them had. Every strike, every parry, was deliberate, as though he saw the art of war as something to be studied rather than merely endured. The knights had mocked him at first. How could they not? A boy famed for carving toys and clever trinkets, suddenly telling men twice his age to run, stretch, and sing. Yet they followed. Gods help them, they followed. Because it worked. Soon, the training yards of Runestone were alive before dawn. While the rooster still crowed and the sea breeze bit through the mist, the knights and squires gathered. They began with stretches. Something no Royce man had ever thought to do before battle. Ronan said it lessened the strain, and though most didn't understand how, they soon noticed that soreness faded faster and fewer men were laid up with pulled muscles. Then came the running, not just a few laps about the yard, but full jogs across the coastal roads and cliffs of Runestone. They ran past the fishing ports and over the old bronze causeways, boots thudding in unison, the breath of 100 men rising like fog. To keep the rhythm, Ronan had them sing. He called it cadence, some strange foreign word that caught on quickly. And of them all, one song became Willem's favorite, the marching chant known as, "Come on over." Which went like, "Come on over. The war's not over. So put your weapon next to mine. And we'll beat 'em all down the line. I hacked Insurgent 1. Did that one just for fun. So put your weapon next to mine. And we'll beat 'em all down the line. Come on over. The war's not over. So put your weapon next to mine. And we'll beat 'em all down the line. I sliced Insurgent 2. Did that one just for you. So put your weapon next to mine. And we'll beat 'em all down the line. I cut Insurgent 3. Did that one just for me. So put your weapon next to mine. And we'll beat 'em all down the line. Come on over. The war's not over. So put your weapon next to mine. And we'll beat 'em all down the line. They all sang it in chorus, their voices rising over the surf, echoing through the cliffs. Willem thought it foolish at first, singing while training, but then realized how effective it was. It unified them, kept the line together, the pace even, the morale high. No one fell behind when the rhythm carried them. That was what made Ronan's methods work, Willem decided, they made men want to move together. The songs, the drills, the constant improvement, none of it felt like labor when it was done as one body. And Ronan kept improving things. Gods, he never stopped. Running soon turned into weighted runs, hauling stones up the steep ridges of the vale, forging endurance on the same slopes that once forged bronze. Then came swimming lessons. At first, many balked. Knights were not sailors, after all. But Runestone thrived on its ports, its fleets, its coastal holds, and Ronan said a man who could not swim had no place defending the sea. So they swam. They learned to row, to fish, to haul nets. They became seafaring warriors in truth, fit to defend the tides as well as the mountains. It did not stop there. There were the strange push-ups, where men lowered their bodies to the ground and raised them again until their arms trembled. The pull-ups, where they hung from iron bars until their strength failed after lifting up their own bodies many times over. And many other exercises that targeted some body part and honed it. Even the legs, as leg days are said to be just as important. In any case, there were also weighted lifts, where they raised great stones or heavy and special-shaped irons again and again. Ronan said these built the muscle, and though few knew how that made sense, none could deny its results. Every knight in Runestone began to stand straighter. Strike harder. Endure longer. Even the veterans, men like Sir Gerald and Gunthor Royce, the bronze giant, had taken notice. The old guard scoffed at first, but once they saw the younger knights and even the training squires lasting longer in sparring bouts, they quietly began to adopt the same habits. And then came the weapons. Wherein Ronan was a master of them all. Even the designated master-at-arms had to call him Grandmaster-at-arms as no jape. The yard rang with his lessons on sword and shield, axe and spear, dagger and hammer, even the bow. His methods were precise and measured, with each weapon studied like a discipline of its own. He broke them down to motions, angles, ranges, momentum, so that even the most stubborn squires found themselves improving. He taught not only how to strike, but why the strike worked. Knife-throwing contests became a daily practice. Splitting wood with the axe turned from a chore to a drill. Using hammers to help with building, using said hammers and clashing it against molten metals, to train warhammering. But maybe it's just to use able bodies for anything they could be needed. Especially the buildings, restoration, and what else Ronan needed from them. Ships most foremost. And there are even unarmed training, fists, grapples, stances, all honed beneath his eye. To train as though you will one day be unarmed, which was Ronan's reasoning. Apparently, a knight's worth is not in his weapon, but in his will. And Willem took that to heart. So, they fought with hands, elbows, knees, and feet, a system he was apparently, reverse engineering, called the art of 8 limbs. If restricted by half of that, he taught kickboxing, among the other so-called martial arts he's still coming up with. And if restricted even further, they continued with just fists, with a style that was mostly boxing. Yet their strengthening of their skills and body seemed not enough. As Ronan had them trained in games of wit, from the simple checkers, the complicated chess, to the more familiar sivas. And drilled them in discipline, virtue, and the so-called ethics of men. Each was expected to live by a code of chivalry beyond the mere words of vows that Vale Knights lived by. Reciting rules like scripture, from the 10 Commandments and counting. Before long, 4 years passed, and Runestone changed. Where once there had been only proud knights of bronze, now there stood a growing army, leaner, sharper, stronger. About 1,000 men bore the rune of House Royce, and their fame spread beyond the Vale. Bards sang of their discipline, of the bronze order that moved as one, whose chants shook the coast and whose endurance never failed. Willem watched it all unfold, half in awe, half in disbelief. Runestone had always been strong. Now it was formidable. Feared among the mountain clans and maybe even the Vale's bannermen. And it all began with the boy they once called Bastard. The Bastard of Bronze. Willem often thought of what a wise man said once, long ago, that some men follow tradition because it made us great. Others change it because they wish to make us greater still. Ronan Stone, it seemed, was the latter. And what Willem considered the Bronze Age of Runestone had begun from here on out. Chapter 17. Gerald remembered the first time the so-called Bronze Order took to war, and it was when the snows had only just begun to melt. The mountain clans came down as they always did when the thaw came, hungry, desperate, and wild. 3 named tribes of them were seen that spring. The scarred skins from the eastern slopes, men who scarred their own bodies to show they feared no pain. The crowtooth kin from the high passes, who wore talons around their necks and adorned themselves with dark feathers. And the stone vultures, who made their camps upon old ruins and picked at the dead after every battle, believing they took the fallen's strength for themselves. They came in hundreds. Driven not by conquest, but by hunger. The developing ports of Runestone were rich with salted meats, grains, and dried fish, all that the mountains and its wild inhabitants lacked. By the time word reached the castle, the clans had already begun to raid the outlying hamlets. Fires burned across the coast, and smoke rose like banners. The alerted Lady Rhea called her knights and men, and under her command rode Esser Gerald himself, alongside Esser Gunthor, and her young son. Ronan Stone. It was his first true battle as the known commander and builder of the Bronze Order. In any case, the men were ready. Their drills had long prepared them for this day. They formed ranks upon the misty shore, shields overlapping, spears braced, their swords at the ready. Meanwhile, the mountain clans screamed and charged from down the hills. The ranks of bronze met them head-on. While Ronan's orders were crisp and simple. No shouting. No frenzy. Advance, brace, strike. Every man moved as if bound to the next by a chain. With the savages breaking before others even knew it. Their chieftains slain, their awed pride trampled, and their wounded taken to the prisons. Perhaps only their babes and ill were left behind, in wherever crevice of the mountains they settled. The ports were saved, and the name Bronze Order was spoken with awe throughout the ports. But it would not be the last time they proved themselves. The second came only moons later, this time from the sea. Pirates out of the stepstones, flying false lies and colors, had come to plunder Runestone's trade. Their ships appeared on the horizon at dawn, 13 strong, their sails striped and their decks crawling with cutthroats. Perhaps thinking that the shores of bronze were easy compared to Goldtown. Unfortunately for them, the young Ronan had prepared for this. He had men who could swim, who could row, who could fight upon deck and wave alike. The order became a navy, using the very ships they had become the unwitting shipwrights of. Nonetheless, the sea battle lasted only a while. The young Ronin fought the quickest, cutting through the enemy lines with a calm no older knight could muster. Gerald remembered it clear, the crash of ships, the ringing of steel, the smoke of burning woods adrift. When the tide turned, the pirates tried to flee, but the waters ran red behind them. Not one escaped. That day, Runestone's ports became known as a trap for sea raiders. The local bards styled it as the day the Bronze ruled their waters. And Gerald, watching the young lord standing drenched upon the dock, thought to himself, this is what the old kings of bronze must have looked like. Only a few years passed, and Runestone's power clearly grew. As a result of the changes that he himself has observed and taken part in. Then came the most recent call from the Eyrie. Lord Yorbert Royce, old and failing, still served as regent to young Lady Jane Arryn. But as his health waned, so too did the loyalty and patience of lesser houses. Meaning that a faction from the lands of the Vale rose in rebellion, distant cousins and uncles of Jane Arryn's, who claimed no girl should rule the Vale. Rhea answered to Lord Royce's dire call. With the banners of Runestone riding out at once. While the Bronze Order marched beside the Knights of the Gates loyal to Yorbert, their chants echoed through the valleys of the mountainous land. The battle was fought on the slopes beneath the Eyrie, where the waterfall's water never truly falls. The rebel lords had thought to surprise them, but the Bronze moved like a single creature. Shield met shield. Steels met bronze. By the time the sun rose over the mountains, the rebellion was ended. Lord Yorbert lived long enough to see victory. But not the peace that followed. On his deathbed, he called Rhea and Ronan to his side. His voice was frail, but his eyes were still sharp. Runestone stands. He said. Keep it so. Serve your liege. Honor our oath. When the bells tolled for his passing, Lady Rhea Royce was made Lady of Runestone at last. And with her banners still bloodied from battle, she strode to the halls of the Eyrie to bend the knee. Lady Jane Arryn received them in the high hall. A small girl still, only a few years older than the young lad Ronan, but also composed regal beyond her years, sitting upon her rightful heritage on the Eyrie's seat. Below her heightened throne, stood her loyalist knights and maesters, and before her knelt Rhea Royce, with her son at her side. You have done your duty more than well, Lady Rhea. Jane said, her voice soft but firm. And I owe you my safety. We owe only what was agreed upon. Rhea replied, bowing her head. The Arryns rule, and the Royces defend. And defend, you did, Jane said. So much so that the realm must be singing of it already. But my companions tell me of a boy who led men as if he were thrice his age. A boy who fights with a mind as sharp as his blade. The boy of wonders who even amused me. To which, her eyes fell upon Ronan. Step forward. So, he obeyed. Ronan Stone. She also stepped down and went closer, saying, for your valor in the mountains, the sea, and the Vale itself, I would name you Sir Ronan Stone, Knight of the Vale. Yet Ronan lowered his gaze. Lady Arryn, I am honored, but I must ask, do not knight me as Stone. You do not even need to knight me at all. Just let me bear the name of my mother, if it please you. Royce, as I have served. The court murmured, but Lady Rhea said nothing. Her eyes only glistened. Jane studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, and relented. Then so it shall be. She shakily drew a sword, belonging to her father, the late Lord Arryn's, and touched it to Ronan's shoulders. In the name of the Seven, I charge you to be brave. In the name of your ancestral Bronze Kings, I name you Royce. From henceforth, you shall be Sir Ronan Royce. With that, the hall erupted. Gerald remembered the sound, the cheer that shook the high walls, the stamping of bronzeshod boots upon marble. Ronan Stone was no more. He rose as Sir Ronan Royce, the youngest knight ever sworn in the Vale and perhaps Westeros, the boy who had reforged the bronze of Runestone and breathed new life into old honor. And Gerald, standing among the ranks at present, thought that the mountains will be sure to remember this corrected name. The infestations of the seas will too. For under this young knight and legitimized Royce heir, marched an army of knights and warriors that tore through them. And yes, before he knew it, the young squire he took in had grown, with said squire to actually be the one teaching him more than a thing or two. All in all, Gerald Royce had quite the mix of feelings when it came to that undisputable fact. Chapter 18. After the Arryn rebellion was crushed, peace did not come easily to the Vale. The fighting was over, but the tension remained. Old loyalties had been shaken, and old houses spoke in low tones about the state of things. The talk was the same across every holdfast and village. Could a woman truly rule and keep the Vale together? Some said no, that men were meant to lead. Others said yes, that the Vale was better under the calm of Lady Jane Arryn than under a dozen feuding lords who had dubious intentions. Though the question reminded many of the Great Council. Some maesters asked what might have happened if the lords had chosen Princess Rhaenys instead of King Viserys. Would the realm have torn itself into conflict sooner like it is with Lady Jane's rule? Or would it have been far worse? Whatever their thoughts, the realm had no peace of mind now either. King Viserys still had only one trueborn child. Princess Rhaenyra, and his brother Daemon remained a problem no one wanted to deal with. It was a quiet unease, but a deep one, and everyone paying attention could feel it. Which was further emphasized with Lord Yorbert Royce's death, and having another woman take his place, making it so that Lady Rhea Royce was now the official ruler of Runestone. To some, it seemed a fine thing, for she was capable and fierce. But others saw it as another sign that the Vale had lost its old order. The Eyrie was led by a girl, and Runestone by another. Grumblings about these issues could have risen some more in the mountains and the small folk of the lands, until those same voices fell silent after hearing of what had also happened on the battlefield of this noteworthy rebellion. The Order of the Bronze, trained and led by the young Ronan Stone, had fought like a wall of knights and warriors that seemed insurmountable. Mountain clans were crushed by them. And pirates who should have harried the coast had vanished because of them. Which were rightfully commendable in their own right. But to think that even the rebel army who tried to overthrow Jane Arryn were beaten back faster than anyone expected. And that was something else. So, people began to pay more attention to this Bronze Order, of soldiers who apparently moved as one, fought as one, and never broke ranks. But most of all, they spoke of their leader. A boy not yet grown, already commanding men twice his age. A bastard of the Lady Rhea, raised and legitimized to heirship. And now, a knight named by the Lady of the Eyrie herself. It caused an uproar in the realm and in rumors. The lords of traditions called it a scandal. A bastard made heir and a boy made knight. It was clear to them that the Vale had lost its wits. Still, some people will always see things differently. Either way, Runestone grew stronger than ever. Its trade doubled, its small ports expanding into a connected harbor, and its people walked safer roads than most of the realm could claim. Of course, as the rest of the realm clamored and murmured, the two talked about ladies of the Vale convened more often than ever. Lady Jane heard the criticisms daily. She is too young, they said. She is but a woman, even more so, a girl. They emphasized. So, she needs a husband. She needs a man to steady her rule. They demanded. To that, she answered only with what she could: steady lands, quiet borders, and a maintained Vale. However, and whenever she met with Lady Rhea Royce in the Eyrie, they often shared their sentiments over such words. Lady Jane, as grown as she might be, still needed a guide. And who better than the one who filled Lord Yorbert's seat? Also, there was comfort in their partnership. Both knew the cost of holding power in a world that did not think they should have it. Letters from doubting lords went unanswered. Whispers were met with silence. And every passing day of ignoring the noise made their positions stand taller. Through certain truths that none can deny. Of course, almost always behind and between them stood Sir Ronan Royce, a young knight who had become both ally and problem. He had the respect of the East's strongest soldiers, the loyalty of the Bronze, and the ear of both women. It made some uneasy. To the lords of the mountainous kingdom, he was either a weapon or a warning. To Lady Jane, he was a rare mind, quick, strategic, and unburdened by pride. To Lady Rhea, he was blood and proof that their house would not fade quietly. The three of them, the Maiden of the Eyrie, the Lady of Runestone, and the Young Bronze as they called him, were almost obviously trying to stir the future of the Vale together. And though the rest of the realm doubted women in power, or bastards raised to honor, the fact of the matter still stood, and the banners of the Falcon and the Bronze still flew. That, for now, was enough. Chapter 19. Well, this partnership with Jane is good and all, but this back and forth is way too time-consuming. Ronan complained, as he rode on horseback. Especially because he had just finished a pivotal project of his, and before he could celebrate the W, a letter just had to be downer for the excitement of it. A letter that requests for his presence, at the considerably distanced area at that. Which really wasn't anything unusual ever since Jane and his mother became besties through the trials and tribulations. What made it bad is that he became the ping-pong ball that was being pinged and ponged in between them. Of course, his mother was actually quite hands-off and was used to giving him the independence. That stuck-up and long-necked girl is getting more and more dependent to him, however. Asking him advice about how to do this and that, and offering a position like advisor or whatever. Ronan generously gave advice when he can but always nodded on that open job position. The travel from Runestone to the area and vice versa would be the biggest pain to such a decision for him. Especially at times when Jane needed him for face-to-face discussion, when ravens zooming through the air is not an option. If only old Gramps Yorbert was still alive and kicking, then the girl would have someone else to bother. Then again, he kind of owed the girl a lot. Not just in terms of the knighting and debastardization and taking in all the flack from the haters, but also in terms of money. The liege lady was rich from collecting all the taxes from the houses of the Vale, Runestone included, and Ronan sort of asked quite a sum already to fund certain expensive projects of his. And he probably will be shamelessly borrowing some more in the future. So, as someone who Jane knighted herself, he had to do his duty. Duty is her debtor as well. Who knows? Maybe he'll get a discount in some of his payments, or maybe lower the interest for future moolah transactions. Eventually, Ronan passed through all the checkpoints and counted all the freaking stairs of the area, and was then led into the Lady Erin's solar, where Lady Jane waited for him. Just before the both of them could talk business, and before he or she could speak any further, a knock came at the chamber door. Jane straightened immediately, her tone always firm, asking, "Who is it?" A voice answered from beyond the door, saying, "It's Jessamine, my lady. A raven's come from King's Landing. Enter." Jane assented. Lady Jessamine Redfort stepped inside, her expression schooled but her eyes flickering briefly toward Ronan, the boy knight standing near the lady, his custom bronze armor lettered with runes. Of course, there was no hiding the hint of wariness that crossed her face before she bowed. "My lady," Jessamine said, holding out the parchment sealed with the crown's wax. "It bears the king's hand." Jane accepted it carefully, glancing once more at Ronan as if aware of Jessamine's unspoken thoughts. "You may speak freely, Jessamine. We've no secrets here." That earned her Lady Inwhiting's faint frown. "As you say, my lady. The message concerns a royal tourney to celebrate the coming birth of the king's son. His Grace calls upon you, the Warden of the East, to attend." Jane studied the seal in silence for a long moment, her eyes unreadable. "So the King Viserys holds festivities once again," she murmured. "While the realm still counts its losses, of his other babes, that is. The cousins I would have had. The tears that my aunt have shed for them." Jessamine hesitated before adding, "There is more, my lady. A second raven, addressed to make you compel Sir Ronan Royce. It seems the king truly wishes to see the Vale's youngest knight himself." Ronan looked up at that, meeting Jessamine's pointed gaze. He could almost hear the satisfaction in her tone, and see the weird jealousy in her gaze. Jane turned toward him, brows slightly raised. "You've been summoned, then." "It would seem so," Ronan said simply, in common tongue eloquence. "Though I've heard such summons before, and I have always found ways to decline them." Jane nodded. "Indeed. Your mother and I have long agreed that the Vale's duty lies here, not in courtly spectacle." She paused, turning the parchment between her fingers. "But the king's words are firmer this time. It says here, by personal request and royal order. And aside from his kingly request, he's asking me to use my power as your liege lady as well." Jessamine's tone held an edge of finality. "Then it cannot be refused." Ronan let out a sigh at that, saying, "So it would seem." On the inside, he was complaining again. This time because of the timing of things. And also, because of all the potential Targaryen drama that he really hopes to not be thrown into. Canon is coming, after all. Chapter 20. Honestly, Ronan could not care less about the main storyline, he was more content with doing his own thing. But it would seem that his other heritage was catching up to him, specifically because he was technically part of the House of the Dragon. By virtue of his father, who is Daemon Targaryen, who is apparently astute enough in this universe to discredit his bronze bitch, annul the marriage without horse-riding accidents, and said bronze bitch for a long, long time. So, well played to the rogue prince and better luck this time to his lady mother Rhea. But, at least, she wouldn't be murdered by a dude in his murder hoodie. In any case, Ronan continued to discuss what Lady Jane wanted to discuss, while treating the jealous Redfort like the heir in this high-altitude palace, and then left with an excuse and a goodbye. He kind of needed to prepare for the trip, and it just so happened that the pivotal project he just wrapped up was sort of perfect for the job. The uncanny timing of things, indeed. Of course, with all that covered, he also had to prepare for whatever was going to greet them there. The king has been trying to summon him for over a year now, after all, and it is kind of easy to guess why. On paper, it was because of the accolades of his Bronze Order and being a talked about young knight who beat bastardy. But on that paper's fine fine print, the dude could already be suspecting something else, and this mandatory face-to-face is meant to confirm it and all. Ronan felt like he was delaying the inevitable this whole time, and given that the king was being more forceful, it is bound to happen anyways. So, with that mindset, why not just go with the flow? And maybe see some of the scenes that he saw on the show, on a more personal perspective. Meaning that to treat it as a sightseeing vacation was the right way to go. Meanwhile, Lady Rhea Royce stood by the open window of her solar, the cold wind from the sea pushing against her dark hair. Looking by the port, something floated noticeably, themed with colors of bronze. It was Ronan's newest work, finished only days ago. And it was years in the making, a goal he had long worked towards for so long. The boy had inherited her stubbornness, no doubt, though the rest of him, the sharper edges and the boldness, those were not hers. 2 letters lay on her table, waiting to be read again. The seal it bore was the crown's, and Rhea did not doubt there were also others like them. Rhea already knew what it said. She had read one of those letters twice now. The words carried weight she had been expecting for years. The king requests his presence. The king requests the presence of her son. And this time, the monarch was not taking any rejection. Meaning that it was time. The late Lord Yorbert's words echoed in her mind again, about how time will tell of her truth. It was quite the distant memory, a young babe beside her as she reasoned and raged. Now, over 3 and 10 years had passed. She had waited long enough for that truth to be seen, for the realm to admit that she had been wronged. Many still whispered that she had driven her husband away, that she had been too proud, too sharp, too unwilling to please. Few cared to remember that Daemon Targaryen had promised her union and respect before the Septon, before many to witness. Fewer still remembered how quickly he had broken that promise, parading his insults before the court, calling her names before half the realm. The bronze bitch. Even now the title clung to her like rust. Rhea had fought to keep Runestone strong while that demon wasted his chances in King's Landing, playing knight and rogue in equal measure. He had left her shamed, mocked, and a whore in the eyes of men. They had called her disloyal, though she knew better. They had a son, in wedlock at that. Before it all went to null. Her son, the boy Daemon had never claimed, the one he had called mistake and shame, had grown into the kind of man the prince could never be. So when the maester came with the raven's missive, Rhea read it again and again. The king's words were careful, but she could sense the truth beneath them. Viserys wanted to see the boy who carried the Royce name, and perhaps to look upon Daemon's reflection, to see what his brother had truly left behind. What the rogue buried with deceit. Perhaps the king meant to absolve her. Perhaps not. Either way, it was time. So, Rhea touched the window frame, tracing the carved runes Ronan had etched there when he was much younger and testing their ancestry. He had apparently made them for protection, and she believed it to work. For his accomplishments had silenced every doubter, the Bronze Order, the rebuilding and progress of Runestone's trade, and the measured respect those achievements gave to her. That protection served far more effective than the elusive signs in this window. Unfortunately, Rhea knew she couldn't do the same to him. To protect him against his label as a stone. Which is why when the chance to legitimizing him arrived, she thought her heart would burst. Sir Ronan Royce. Her boy. The bastard undone. And became a knight so young as well. Still, the stain of being a bastard seemed to always be noted by people. Murmuring and reminding others when they can. Perhaps hoping that it will blunt the boy's ever-sharpening edge. But now, that the boy is growing and his features is molding, new whispers were starting. About how many traveled men actually saw a shadow of Daemon's face in Ronan's, and that was almost enough to stop those damaging tongues. With these new whisper mayhaps making its way to the king, and perhaps why the man had been so insistent of Ronan's presence in the capital. When the king eventually sees Daemon's supposedly obvious shadow in the boy's features, then that would be when absolution comes for her. Let King Viserys see what had become of their mistake. His, Jaehaerys, and so many others. Let them see that the child Daemon had spat upon was now the pride of hers, of Runestone, and make them regret. Of their blindness, of their foolishness, of how gullible they were. Rhea could almost imagine it now, the king's horror, the king's disbelief, and how it will all blow up in Daemon's smug face. Accordingly, let those two brothers choke and argue over it. She will wait for the aftermath that will only be advantageous for her, and much more so for his son. In any case, she turned from the window and summoned one of her attendants. For preparations would begin at once. Her son would ride for King's Landing soon. And she would follow. If Viserys meant to summon his son into the light, then she will see to it that he does it properly. Let the court see that Runestone stood strong, that House Royce endured dishonor, endured mockery, endured time itself, and was still unbroken. Accordingly, Rhea allowed herself a rare smile. Because her son was about to be a prince, the title that should have been promised to him. A princely title he should have had from birth. And she could only wager that this time, no Targaryen or court gossip would take it from him.